welcome back to Little Cuts, our weekly mini-sode where we dig into things that we've been watching and or playing recently. I'm Terry.
And reading, and I'm Mary Beth.
And reading!
Um, I learned how to read. Anyway, this week we are chatting about things that go bump in the night, the worst 911 operator, a fever dream of a novel, an epic sci-fi series, a coming of age ghost story, a cute YA adaptation, and a love letter to Japanese TV.
Aw.
Oh, really?
Oh,
Is that how you feel?
someone has thoughts.
I know, she's got a lot of thoughts and feelings about the media I've been consuming. Anyway.
I mean, that makes perfect sense. So, wait, before we do talk about all the stuff we have been consuming recently, it is a new month. It's Pride. We have new Patreon stuff coming your way, including our Fresh Wounds episode, which we're going to record this weekend, and is going to be about what, Mary Beth?
Inside. Get ready for DIY C-sections.
Spoiler alert.
Well, if you don't know by now, now you do. So that's fine. I feel like most of our listeners know what it is because we've curated that kind of listenership, and I love that for us.
I do love that for us.
We'll also have a new seltzer up shortly. We lost track of time because time is fake. And
I don't think May has actually ended yet. Like I don't think it has.
I don't either. My noodle is blown that it is today when we're recording this is June 1st and it is fucking June. But yeah, support your local gay podcasters and support us on Patreon.
Instead of
throw a coin to your gay podcasters.
Instead of people that use Pride to talk about queerness and then don't talk about it for the rest of the year. You know who you are. and listeners,
if you were if you had video, you'd know what we were doing in the silence. But we're gay. 24/7, 365, baby.
We sure are. Except for that one time where I accidentally came out as straight on that episode.
Oh yeah, I do remember that. What a ride. What a ride.
I tell you. All right. I want to hear about things that go bump in the night.
So things that go bump in the night. This is The Boogeyman, which is now in theaters, directed by Rob Savage of Host fame. I am in the...
Dash King.
Well, that's what... I didn't say that for a reason, but okay. Former guest of the show as well, Rob Savage. But I'm going to be brief about this one because I am in the minority and that I did not really enjoy this movie very much. A lot of people have, but this is one of my all-time favorite Stephen King short stories. And it is a very short story. It is.
You've talked about it a lot on the podcast.
So it's 10 pages long. It's really short. And I was very interested to see how they were going to adapt it. And I'm just not very impressed with how they adapted it. There's some pretty good jump scares. And there's some really interesting shots. I think Rob is really good at framing scares and building to scares.
He really is.
And so I definitely respect that. I just think it was so much. It's aping so much from Smile and these trauma narratives we keep seeing in horror. And so Beck Woods wrote the script, and it's just not very. It's not strong. It feels very cookie cutter. It's very one dimensional. It's very kind of boring to me, personally. So I mean, and it's PG-13. I think it does some good scares, even as PG-13. It's not the rating, I think, that affects it. I think it's just, it's not... It feels a little bit lazy in terms of a trauma narrative. And it's just, I'm getting sick of it. I'm getting really bored of it. As someone who is incredibly traumatized, figure out, it's not that hard to do a good story about trauma, but I feel like people are not understanding what resonates about trauma horror. they're just seeing like the kind of like baseline or like upper level of what that looks like instead of really understanding what they're trying to do. And that's what this movie is. It's someone who like watched the Babadook and was like, I could do that, and they didn't really understand what made the Babadook scary and like affecting. And yeah, so
I
yeah,
I saw Matt Monagle
yeah,
posted today about it, and he did not like
I
it
know.
either. And but I think he and you kind of clued in on the same issue is that
Yes,
we're like the tail end of like trauma being like the go-to horror thing for a, a very long time, it seems like at this point. And I think we're at the tail end of that, and I don't think there's anything else to really mine from it. And so it just feels kind of like you said, cookie cutter.
yes, exactly. And you know, I think a lot of people have liked it, and that's all. And I'm glad. Like, I'm glad that it'll probably do well in theaters. I think it's like definitely has good jump scares, but it just reminds me very much of like mid to late 2000s theatrical runs of like horror movies that were very mid. Gave me those vibes very much. So that's me. I know we don't usually shit on movies here, but I feel like that movie is a big enough release that I don't think my one bad review is going to like put it in the toilet because a lot of people have liked it, and so
Right.
I don't ever feel as bad shitting on a wider release than an indie, only because like it's not as big of a deal. But yeah, so I mean like a lot of you might enjoy it, so I don't know. Don't go in expecting anything
I'm
like the
debating
story.
whether I want to go see it this weekend.
It's just like there's so much in the story that has a lot to do with like toxic masculinity and you've have you read it? The short story?
I have
Okay.
not. I'm not a huge short story
Okay.
fan, or I've historically not been a huge short
Okay.
story fan. So I've that is like one area of King that I've never
Okay.
really I've read a
Okay.
few, but like it's not something that I go look for. And that was that in Nightmares and
Night Shift.
Dreamscapes? Was it in
Night
that
Shift.
one? Night
Yeah.
Shift. Okay. Yeah, I've never read
Okay.
Night Shift.
So Night Shift is like my favorite one, but I also read that when I was really young and I kind of like imprinted on it. Especially because I read the
Mm-hmm.
Boogeyman when I think I was like 10 and that really fucked me up.
Yeah.
But like it's just such a dense, but it's like thematically really dense if like you're reading it from like you know a pretty analytical lens in terms of like masculinity, toxic masculinity, how parent like how fathers think of like it's like very King, but it could have been really cool taking that into like a 2023 context, but instead they made a cookie cutter like kids in peril with a monster kind of movie, and it's like
Gotcha.
boring. It's just like the most boring route you could have fucking taken it. Like there's just like no originality. Anyway, I'm gonna stop now. I'm getting mean. But yeah, that's the Boogeyman out today in theaters if you so wish to see it. I want to hear about the worst 911 operator. Because when you wrote this in our notes, I cackled like a hyena because it caught me off guard because it made just a funny thing to read out of context.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I I got my start reviewing video
Cool.
games, but I haven't really reviewed video games much recently. And I was one night I was like, I really want to try to review this upcoming game that's coming out. And so I had went through, I don't even know how I came across this website it's for press of video games, and it has like a bunch of indie games, and this was one of them that they were putting keys out there for. And so I requested one and I got one. And so I've been playing Killer Frequency since
Hell
last
yeah.
week. And it is out as of the recording of this. So if you're listening to this, it's out. And it is out on everything: Steam, Xbox, PlayStation, Nintendo Switch, Meta Quest 2. So, like, if you have any of those, this is out to play on. And it takes place in 1980s, 1987, I want to say, and you are a radio DJ that used to broadcast out of Chicago and have millions of listeners every night. And something happened and you have been relegated to the small town of Gallows Creek, where your listenership went from millions to like dozens. And you are the late night shift DJ at this small town um, radio
Nothing
station
has
in the
ever gone
80s.
wrong in a
You
small town radio station on the late shift. Nothing has ever gone wrong. Nothing.
nothing. That is definitely not a horror trope at all. And so it's you and your producer Peggy, and you see her like in the room across from you, and it's sort of like fuzzied, like a producer's mirror almost, and she's kind of showing you the ropes of how to maneuver the playing the singles on the record player, playing ads on your cassette tape, answering calls, changing the volume up and down. Like it feels kind of like a workplace simulator in some regard. Um, but then you get a phone call from the 911 dispatch operator who is panicked and saying that Sheriff Matthews, the sheriff in town, has been killed. Um, with some urban legend of the Whistling Man, who was this killer from the 50s who died, quote unquote, under like mysterious circumstances, and you know him by he whistles, and so like there's
Fuck
this
that.
high stakes as he's like stalking
Fuck that shit.
as he's like stalking his prey, and he killed he killed the sheriff. She's unable to get any calls out to neighboring police stations. The phone lines are all dead, and so the very first thing you have to do is basically help her get out of the police station into a car and leaving. And so you have to like provide suggestions that, you know, us horror fans are always screaming at the screen like, do this, you need to grab this, you need to do that. And I got her out of safety, and she went and she's like, okay, now I'm transferring all the 911 calls to your radio station, and you're going to field calls.
No, that's
because
not how
I'm the
this
dispatcher
works.
and I'm
No.
going to bring the cavalry.
No.
And so
Sorry, I just love that. You're
spend
like,
the rest
fuck,
of the
no,
night.
that's not what fuck.
Yeah. He's like, excuse me, what are you doing? She's like, someone needs to do it. You are a radio person. You know how to talk to people. I need you to field the calls while I go bring the cavalry from the nearby town, and it's going to take me 4 hours to get there and
Oh
back.
my god.
So have fun. And so then it's like you trying to play your music. People are calling in for singles to play. There are like weird characters that call in. One person is trying to constantly promote his pizza store, and so he like calls in constantly. And then you're also fielding calls with people that are being chased by the Whistling Man, and you have to use a variety of things to help them out of the predicament. So it has kind of an escape room type vibe to it. Like one part you have a magazine that has like that talks about how to hotwire a car. I don't know why this isn't a magazine, but you know, it's a game. And so you're using that, and you're basically trying to talk this woman through hotwiring her car because she ran from the killer and dropped her keys, and now she's in her car and she can't get out, and the Whistling Man is coming for her.
I'm stressed
So you basically
just
have
hearing
to, like,
about
help her.
this.
Yeah, you have to help her like learn how to hotwire the car and get out of there. People can die. I killed more people than I care to admit on my playthrough, which is why this is about the worst 911 dispatch operator, because
Yes.
I was not good at saving a lot of people. But it's fun. It's a little cheesy. It's a little silly. There's a little bit of ludonarrative dissonance in it because
Okay.
like the actual solving puzzles don't have any time limits on it. So it feels
Oh.
like the killer's just sort of like waiting for you to get things done. So there's like a little bit of that kind of silliness to it that is inherent with playing the game. But it's a fun story. It has a couple of good twists and turns, some fun music in it, and really good voice acting. The voice acting reminded me
Ooh.
of Firewatch.
Oh,
Is
okay.
that what it was called? Did we talk about this game before?
Yeah.
Firewatch? Have you played? Okay, I thought we talked
We've
about
talked
it.
about it before, yeah. A while ago, but yeah.
So it has kind of like that same quality of voice acting, and it's fun, and it's available pretty much everywhere you want to play games at. So
Hell yeah.
I
Is it on
recommend
Switch?
This one was a good one. It is.
Sweet.
Yep. It's on Switch, PlayStation, Xbox, Steam, MetaQuest 2,
That
everywhere that
sounds-
you can probably play a game.
It sounds fun. And stressful as fuck. But
It is
like,
fun. Yeah.
did you ever play Papers, Please? So I know it's not
Yes.
the same, but I love games that are like you have one person that you're like working. It's like little mini missions in the grand scheme of the game. Like that
Hmm.
is, I love doing stuff like that. Like it help. I don't know why, but the ADHD task brain in me very much loves stuff like that. So that sounds very much on my. And what's the like? It's a good vibe. Like
Yeah.
the art is cool and everything. I saw the pictures you posted
Oh,
on
the
Twitter,
art
and
is
I thought
really
it was
cool.
cool.
And those are what it looks like in
Okay.
game. That those aren't like faked faked screenshots. It looked, or at least I played on the PlayStation
Okay.
5 and it looked that good. Um, yeah, it has a really distinct 80s vibe to the art style.
Sick.
Characters are exaggerated. It's really, I think it's a really special little
Hell
indie game,
yeah.
and I highly recommend it. Took me about 5 hours to beat, so it's not that
Okay.
long. But I think my only real complaint about it is the fact that because it is very much like an escape room, like the kind of puzzles that you're doing are kind of escape room-ish
Okay.
puzzles, so that once you've figured them out, it's kind of like you know what the answer is. You know what I
Oh,
mean? So it's
okay.
not like I can't see myself replaying this game
Okay.
unless I was an achievement hunter and wanted to like save everyone or kill everyone on the
Yeah.
playthrough. I the puzzles, once you figure it out, you're gonna know what to do, and it's kind of meaty,
Okay.
but it's a good experience for the 5 hours of
Okay.
playing it. It does not overstay its welcome. I enjoyed it a lot.
And how much is it? Do you
I
know?
don't
Okay, cool.
actually
I was just
know.
curious if you knew. Sweet.
I'll look that up while we continue
Cool.
onward. A fever dream of a novel.
Yes. So, as y'all have seen, I have been reading more recently, which has been very nice because I have not been reading, and I'm finally like kind of hitting my stride with being more consistent and getting things off my fucking to be read list because good lord, the stack of books I have on my bedside table is obscene, and I continue to buy more books instead of reading them. So I am making a much more concerted effort to like read the things I have before buying more books. I just need all of you to stop writing new shit that I really want to read, fuckers. Said with love because you are all very smart and creative. But this is a book that I was recommended on Book Talk, which I have fallen into. Yes, cliche. I don't care. I've gotten some cool book recommendations from it. This is Bunny, written by Mona Awad. Awad. Pardon me if I'm saying your name wrong. This is a book I've heard a bunch about, and I read it in one day. I have not read a book in one day in a very long
Oh wow.
time, and I read it while I was getting my nails done, and then I came home and had to finish it because I was so sucked into the world that Awad creates in this book. So the book takes place in this like prestigious, New England college that has a very prestigious MFA program. And in this MFA program is our hero Samantha, who is an outcast, and she's an outcast in her cohort because her cohort is made up of a group of girls who call themselves the Bunnies, and they are all very rich, young, attractive women, and they have seemed to like form some kind of weird cult. And so I'm doing great. So in this book, Samantha is basically like poor, quiet, but also like has that superiority complex that sometimes like bullied people get when they're like, "Well, I'm better." Like, and it's about how she's kind of obsessed with these women, but also hates them, and then she's invited into their circle. And what happens is like her kind of integration into this strange like group of rich white women and kind of looking into their privilege. And it sounds like kind of cliche, but I cannot explain to you like the weird fever dream experience of reading this book. It's like reading, it's not necessarily stream of consciousness, but you're reading like it's like Mean Girls but with like weird cult stuff happening, and I don't want to spoil like what they're doing, but there is some crazy shit going on that is very odd and cult like and just absolutely bizarre. And
Hmm.
the it's just like I don't want to spoil it because it's just one of those books that you
Right.
like need to know as little as possible going into it. But it takes like that kind of dark academia vibe of like, oh, you're a loner in a program, and kind of gives us a character who is kind of annoying, and like you kind of wish she would reduce the superiority complex, but then also kind of interrogates academia, racism in academia, classism in academia, while also having this really bizarre plot that involves like there's three parts of the book. The second part is totally entirely as a collective by with the like just using with a we pronoun, and it's really
Oh,
cool. And it's just like you really get into these characters' heads, and it's just like incredibly compelling in terms of what Awad is doing with the story.
and it's called Bunny.
Bunny, yeah,
I'm
it's
gonna have
just
to go add this
called
to my.
Bunny. Yes. And yeah, I don't want to say too much else because
Yeah,
it'll
don't
spoil
spoil it.
it. But it's
Also,
also queer. It's
it's
queer too.
oh sweet,
Yeah,
and
it's
it's a
queer.
full length book. Like a lot of horror that we've been reading recently is like 100 and some odd pages, but this
Yeah.
is
I've been reading a lot of novellas, but this is like a full on like 300 page novel. So this is like a full novel scenario.
adding it to my list.
Yep, and that I read it in one day.
I mean,
Granted, I had
that's
I
saying
got
something.
I mean like partially because I was getting my nails done, I was getting a pedicure and a full acrylic set, but still, I could have stopped reading it and looked on my fucking phone, and I read it the whole time. Like, I couldn't stop reading it. I think my nail tech was like, who is this bitch? But I was like, I cannot put this book down. Until you take my hands away from me, I will not stop reading this book. So, yeah, I've been doing a big deep dive into like weird girl literature as it's called, and it's so
Okay.
fucking tailored to what I love with like messy women and weird gore and fucked up shit, and it's going great. So
Hell yeah.
people can say that they will about book talk, but like I think I found my niche in book talk where I get all of like the really disturbing weird
Well, I think that's the thing.
recommendations.
That's the thing. Like book talk is it's the same thing as like a lot of people like, oh, it's a book talk book, but like I I don't know. There's a lot of like you have to find your kind of niche in there, and I do
Yeah.
think that there are some that are just like, what's the most disturbing thing I've read, and it's something that's not at all disturbing, but like there are areas that you can find yourself in. Like I found some good queer books out of book talk, and
Yeah. And
so
there's some really good creators who are just like actually trying to read like cool interesting stuff, and a lot of the people I follow it's like horror and disturbing books, but it's like I've gotten introduced as like more splatterpunk that way, and then
mm,
so I have found my niche of like cool alt girls who also look like they live in the woods who are recommending like the most fucked up books you've ever read, and that's my favorite because I'm one of those girls except I don't live in the woods. So,
there is
so
someone on book talk that I enjoy her posts. I think her name is Geneva Rose,
I don't
and
remember if I don't know if that
she
rings any
wrote a book
bells.
called The Perfect Marriage and You Shouldn't Have Come Here.
Oh, I
And like
know. I've heard of You Shouldn't Have Come Here.
she has like she her TikTok, a lot on her TikTok is she talks about this guy named Scott that decided he needed to email her and tell her how terrible he thought Perfect
Yes.
Marriage
Oh, I
was.
know exactly what you're talking about.
And
Yes.
she talks in like this very deadpan voice, and I love her. I haven't read
I
any of her
also
books
love
yet, but
her.
I love her.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like, I think that there are some people who are reading some really cool stuff, and like, I have found some really awesome books through that because sometimes it's hard to just Google like good horror books. I want like the
It
really
really
tailored
is.
to me shit. And if you put in the time of the TikTok algorithm, you will get very specifically tailored content to you.
You sure will. And
And
there's one time where you will talk about arachnophobia, and then all of a sudden TikTok is showing you a bunch of spiders. So TikTok algorithms, they're very specific.
they sure fucking are. So yeah, that's Bunny. So if you're looking for like a full
Sweet.
length, it's horror. It's definitely horror. There's like body horror in it, and yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's funny. Um, so this is very different, taking a big swing. An epic sci-fi series. Tell me more about it.
So if you follow me on Twitter, you know that I hurt my shoulder. You know that I've been in a lot of pain and I'm dealing with numbness. And if you're watching this, you probably have seen me rubbing my two fingers, and this is why. It's not a nervous tick. I am just still numb in my hand. But this weekend, I had all these plans of like watching a bunch of festival films that I need to watch and do some reviews, but I couldn't. And I thought this is the perfect time for me to just sit down and watch something that I've been wanting to watch for a very long time. And I decided it was going to be the Apple TV series Foundation,
Oh, okay.
which
Cool.
which is based on the Foundation series of novels by Isaac
Ayn Rand.
Asimov.
Oh, Ayn Rand. Am I insane? Jesus Christ. I hope. Just take me out. Just fucking take me out. I said that with such confidence too. That's embarrassing.
You
Anywho,
did.
I really did.
No, this is not about the what was her philosophy? Objectivism? Was that what?
Yeah, I was
I
thinking of
can't remember.
Fountainhead, not Foundation.
Fountainhead. Hmm.
Ugh.
Um,
Anyway.
and Foundation. So I watched all 10 episodes of the first season because I couldn't stop watching. I was immediately hooked.
Oh.
The
Okay.
second season is starting in July, so now is a perfect time to get caught up if you have Apple TV, because this show is amazing. I was blown
Hell
away at
yeah.
just how
Okay.
amazing it was. And for a story that seems incredibly unfilmable, because we're talking about Foundation is set over the course of hundreds of years. Like, in the first episode alone, we are zapping back 400 years in the past. We are eventually going 136 years into to the future, and then we're going to go 34 more years into the future. Like, this is like giant gaps of time. But the
Okay.
way that the show handles this is very fascinating because the it's about like this scientist Harry Seldon, who's played by Jared Harris, who has this
Oh,
like
hee hee. I love him.
I do too. And he has this like theory. I cannot remember what the title is, even though it said so much. I think it's like psychohistory or something like that. And it's
Okay.
basically this idea of taking math and being able to plot out giant changes that are going to come. So it's not about like the
Oh.
small micro moments, but it is about like big 100 year, 500 year, 1,000 year type predictions of what's going to happen based on statistics and math and all this kind of funky shit. And he predicts that that the empire, which has been ruled for thousands of years, is going to come to an end in 500 years from now, and it's going to send the galaxy into a dark age that's going to last thousands upon thousands of years unless they do something to change it, is what he's saying. And the emperor, who and this is where it gets really interesting for me. The emperor is there's four emperors, but they're the same person, and they're clones of one emperor. So
Oh.
there's always going to
Okay.
be Emperor Dawn, Day, Dusk, and Darkness, and they are played by the
Oh.
same people all this time because they are a direct clone from this one king that started 400 years ago, and he decided that we're just going to keep cloning myself, and that is how the empire is going to keep continue to survive. So at every one time,
Oh.
there's always going to be a young one, an adult one, a elderly person, and someone that is going to the great beyond, and they just keep moving in through this rows. And when someone dies, or if someone in a current generation dies, they have them on backup that they'll just pop them out, and they've been like inputting information into their brains this entire time while they're in some kind of like weird womb state, and they come out fully formed knowing everything. So these are like people that have continued to exist, and their minds have continued to exist for like 400 years, and that's how they get
Oh.
around this idea of transitioning the plot through hundreds of year time, is because they're always going to be the same thing. So the bad guy is always going to be this dude played by Lee Pace, Terrence Mann, and someone else. They were always there. And then there's the good guys that are
Oh.
being attacked, and they end up getting well, one, it's really kind of confusing, but I will say it makes more sense when you're watching it. It just sounds like a
Okay.
clusterfuck trying to explain it. But this show goes on over many decades, characters will come out. There'll be new characters coming in, but
Okay.
there's this core kind of trio of like the Emperor and Harry Seldon, played by Jared Harris, and then a woman named Gal, who is played by Lou Lobel, and it's so fascinating and it is so interesting,
Huh.
and I just like I don't it's this is grand television in the same way that people hold up like Game of Thrones in terms of the look, in terms of the feel of it. This is like
Oh.
epic, expensive. It's blowing away so much that I've seen on television recently that have been trying to meet kind of the scale of this. It is epic
Oh.
in a huge way, and I
Huh.
could not stop watching it. I watched all 10 episodes in a weekend.
Oh shit. And where?
Yeah.
What service is that again?
It's on Apple TV.
Damn, you are an Apple TV
I
stan.
tell you what, I am.
They're
they
doing some
remind
good
me
stuff
of like
though. They really are like
it
putting out
reminds me
some
of
good
like
stuff.
of HBO Max when HBO Max was in like the golden years of like putting
Yeah.
out prestige content. Like that is what I said content prestige shows. That is what Apple feels like right now. And I think there's some really good stuff that not a lot of people are watching, which I don't know how they're continuing to fund Foundation because it looks fucking expensive.
Really? Okay.
It looks so good. And I love it. And I really highly recommend it.
Cool. Okay. I've like thought about it and I wasn't sure, but this now makes me want to do it.
Like just the simple idea of like the emperors just like really
That's really cool.
it's
That's
so
really
fascinating
cool.
and it is so well done and it makes perfect sense in the story, and it does at one point there might be some kind of genetic malfunction in the emperors and it's causing consternation among them, and it just there's
Oh.
interesting things that happen because of that, and I find the whole thing just so fascinating. I was blown away, and I've never read the books, but I was blown away by this adaptation.
Okay. Well, I'm going to have to watch it cuz it sounds incredibly fascinating and very much in
It
like
really
my
is.
deep lore kind of interests.
Yeah, I would say so, absolutely.
Hell yeah.
uh
Okay. Cool.
Swinging again though, a coming of age ghost story.
Uh so I this is Charlotte Le Bon's new directorial debut Falcon Lake, which
Mm,
is coming out. It should be in select theaters as of the publication of this post slash this episode, and it's from Yellow Veil Pictures. It's this incredibly beautiful coming of age story, but it's also incredibly full of dread and melancholic. And it follows this young boy named Bastien, who is going to spend the summer with his family at a family friend's cabin in like lake country in Montreal, basically like rural cabin in the middle of nowhere, summer camp vibes basically. And
yeah.
when he gets there, he meets the family friend. Like he sees the family friend's older daughter Chloe. She's 16. He's about to turn 14, and he's kind of like he's starting to realize that girls are pretty, and they form this relationship. And she's also very fascinated by this urban legend of a young boy drowning in the lake, and she's kind of obsessed with death and kind of retelling the story of the boy in the lake via photographs. And so it's this beautiful Karen Coleman called it like who is the founder of the Future of Film is Female and also a film programmer, and she said that this is like a beautiful slow burn summer film, and it is very much matches that
Okay.
vibe of like lazy summer days where
Mm,
you're a kid and you're kind of bored, but then you're also with your friends, and it's like the kind of bullshit that you get up to when you're a little bit bored and you don't have much to do around you, and the games you play and things like that. But it also is this like look at young teenage desire and obsessing over like obsessions with death, and there's just this air over it that feels like something's going to happen, and it's just like all it's incredibly atmospheric. It's very slow. The score is beautiful. It's shot like it looks like it's from the 70s, but they have iPhones, so
oh,
so it
okay.
like feels very again like that suspended in time and space vibe of of like the lazy days of summer. So it like on the surface kind of looks like your kind of standard coming of age story, but as you watch it, you just get sucked in because it just something feels wrong. and it's in French. It's really good. It's got kind of Call Me by Your Name vibes in terms of like our protagonist. It's not queer, and
Mhm.
there's a little bit like I don't know how we want to talk about age gaps. There isn't like an Army Hammer Timothy thing, but she is 16 and he's 13, so like
Right.
there's some weird shit going on there too. But whatever. There just it has that same kind of vibe of
See, that I
summertime
was when you
love.
were explaining the kind of summertime love, the sort of like
Yes,
the slow burn summer feel, like I was immediately thinking of Call Me by Your Name when you were saying
yes,
that. So,
it very much feels like that, and but like at first, and then it starts to differentiate itself because I was like, oh god, is this gonna just play out like another kind of like a Call Me by Your Name ripoff without the queerness? But no, it really differentiates itself, especially at its end. And like, yeah, not everyone's gonna like it, but I think it's like one of these sneaky, beautiful movies that if you like vibes and sad love in your horror, you will like this movie quite a bit.
hell yeah.
So, Falcon Lake.
I was curious about that one. So
Yeah,
I'm
I
glad to hear
loved
it was
it.
good.
I absolutely loved it. Um,
Sweet. And it's in theaters right now? Is that what you said?
yeah, select theaters. So, or it should, I believe it is. So please check that out. Like, woman directed, cool, kind of plays with how to film desire from a male gaze perspective in an interesting way, I think. So, yeah.
Cool.
This kind of similar maybe vibes. A cute YA adaptation.
Yeah, so um as part of my Frameline 47 queer film festival coverage, which for a lot of the stuff does not have embargoes, so I feel like I can talk about it.
Okay, you're
even
like
though the festival hasn't even though the festival hasn't started yet, but like I, I'm just gonna go with it because I think that everyone's because no one gave me any embargo dates, so
yeah.
here we go. Hopefully, I don't get in trouble. But this is Aristotle and Dante discover the secrets of the universe. And if you have never
Okay.
read a YA book before, that title is pretty much synonymous with almost any YA title. It feels like
Yeah.
anymore. They always have like
Yeah.
these really big sounding titles. It feels sort of like YA books are continuing the trend of like emo pop songs titles from back in the day.
I was gonna say
Like the super
very Fallout Boy, early Fallout Boy.
very Fallout Boy, exactly. But this is a queer uh, love story that's set in 1987 in El Paso, Texas. It is about
Okay.
two teenage Mexican American loners as they kind of discover each other as friends and then sort of navigate some twisty road of self discovery and being open about their queerness. And
Ooh. Okay.
it's a very my biggest complaint about it is that I feel like I've not read this is one YA queer book that I've not read, so I can't really compare it to what the book
Okay.
is. But I will say that if this feels like a Cliff Notes version of the book, like there's a
Okay.
lot of gaps missing. Like I feel like it's again, I've not read the book, so I can't. Maybe this is exactly how the book is, but
Yeah.
there's a couple parts where it feels like we're meant to follow both Dante and Aristotle, um,
Okay.
and we're mostly sticking with Aristotle because Dante moves away for a brief period of time, and
Okay.
so it's sort of like following Aristotle's. He goes by Ari, his journey
Okay.
of self acceptance. Whereas I feel like we don't get to see enough of Dante because he's out of the picture, and I'm wondering if the book kind of delves into both a little bit more
So
because it feels
is it inspired by like the philosophers and the writer? Like, are they like young versions of that, or they just happen to have names of the?
they happen to have names. They're
Okay.
one of them. His dad is like an English professor, and so named him Dante. And I don't remember exactly why Aristotle's name was Aristotle, but
Okay.
like
Cool.
it's just one of those cutesy YA novels, right? Where they're
Okay.
named
I was.
because they're both named after you know
Yes.
poets and stuff. And so like there's really no connection to the works of literature, at least in this adaptation,
Okay,
between
cool.
their characters. They just have cute names because all YA characters must have ridiculously cute names.
Duh.
Um, and so I feel like I do feel like the story kind of skips over a lot of development because there's like some of the story is told through letters that Dante is sending to Eri while they're apart for like a year, and it
Oh,
goes from
okay.
like kind of talking to each other to like Dante saying, "When you masturbate, who do you think of?" Like that is like it's like a very sudden
Oh,
jump, and we don't get to see
certainly a
Dante all of a
forward
sudden.
question.
It really is, and we don't really get to see Dante go from like this questioning to being asked bold enough to ask this question in a letter. And
Oh, okay.
so there's like some things we're missing, but it is a really kind of cute story. It's telling a story that I don't think we see a whole lot because these are people of color. It is set in El
Oh, okay.
Paso, a very conservative time. They're both Mexican Americans. It kind of contrasts their two different family lives, and it just I think that there's a lot of interesting things in here that I recommend it. It's just I feel like I'm missing something, and I'm wondering if it's
Oh,
because the
okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
movie's trying to condense a full book into an hour and 30 minutes, you know?
Yeah.
So, but
Classic
it's really
adaptation
cute.
issues.
Yeah. It's really cute though, and it was really nice to see non, white people going through queer self-acceptance.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed it.
Huh. I love that. Okay. Getting a lot of
Yeah.
like adaptations of YA stuff recently. I guess people are starting to catch on that YA is very popular.
Yeah, and there's one that's coming out later this summer, I think, from Prime that I'm really excited for. Red, White, and Royal Blue. I talked about that novel,
Yeah.
and that's coming out as a Amazon adaptation. I think by the end of the summer. And I'm really excited for that too. So, bring me more YA queerness. Give it to me.
Hell yeah.
uh, all right, and then finally, what is this love letter to Japanese TV?
Okay. So there is a genre of Japanese television called tokusatsu, which is basically where Power Rangers came from. It's like
Okay,
wild TV shows with lots of like special effects and monsters. So there's like Ultraman is one of them. Um, it's a couple others I can't remember. The Toshoutsu channel from the Shout Factory has like plays all of these, but um, I had the distinct pleasure this week of being able to see a love letter to one of these shows called Kamen Rider. I got to see Shin Kamen Rider, directed by Hideki Anno, who is the mad genius behind Neon Genesis Evangelion and
oh,
2016 Shin Godzilla. I love this man with all of my being. He is such a sad little weirdo. Just an icon for us all. But he wrote Shin Ultraman, and now he is back with his next Shin movie, Kamen Rider. And I'm going to try to explain the plot of this movie to you, but a lot of it makes not a lot of sense. So that's fine. That's part of the joy of this. But basically, a man is made into an insect human hybrid, and he is basically engineered by a scientist who regrets giving the insect hybrid creation technology to the world to fight the corporation who wants to use this for evil, which is basically bringing all of humanity together to so everyone always experiences happiness. If you have seen Evangelion, it is basically human instrumentality, but a little bit with a different little flavor. So he is bringing There's Evangelion vibes all up in this. It is very fun. It is very goofy. There's a lot of exposition dumps about things called like prana and all this shit that like you can barely understand, and that's fine. It's not like this is the anniversary, the 50th anniversary of the show, and Hideki Anno is a huge fan of it.
okay.
So this is like a big kind of his tribute to one of the shows that like kind of really shaped Japanese popular culture. And I'm like not super familiar with the original show. I've seen I think maybe one or two episodes, and Steve is a little bit familiar with it too. But it's like super bizarre. Like and the cinematography is very handheld because it mimics the kind of like cheaper like 1980s aesthetic that the show had. So it's like really, really, really a love letter to the show. So I didn't appreciate that as much, but at first, but as like at the end credits, there's like kind of showing like the shots next to each other and how Ano created basically like shots from the original in the new one, and it's just like really cool to see like the respect and honor he gives this iconic show. But it also very much feels like a response to like superhero movies, because this is basically like crazy Japanese superheroes that are like overly sincere and like so cheesy and so like I will save the day, and it's like overly sentimental, and I don't know if he meant it this way, but it just felt like such a response to like the crazy confusion and sentimentality of Marvel. And while he is both like giving a love letter and an appreciation to Kamen Rider, it does also feel kind of like, oh, you want superheroes? Here's some crazy superhero shit. And it kind of like it almost feels like you're gonna watch this and tell me it doesn't make sense, but you're gonna watch like 20 Marvel movies and tell me it all makes sense. Like, and I kind of love that. And again, I don't know if he meant it that way, but it kind of felt that way, and I love that because it is like it feels like these are what Marvel movies are: crazy lore, weird ass relationships, everything doesn't make sense, and yet we all just buy into it. So if you can buy into that, buy into Kamen Rider. I don't know if it's playing anywhere else in theaters. It was like kind of a one night event, but I think it might be playing this weekend in some places. I'm not sure. Check your theaters, and then it'll come to digital soon. So if you're like a tokusatsu fan and are familiar with it, please check it out. It's not as good as Shin Godzilla, but I liked it better than Shin Ultraman. I'm so excited for them. I want them to tackle a new project that is like Godzilla and that's more serious, because Ultraman and Kamen Rider are like, one, they're series of shows and they're very Monster of the Week shows, but also like they're silly because this tokusatsu is supposed to be kind of silly, campy, cheesy, and so it leans into that sensibility, while Shin Godzilla is more of like a horror movie and captures the ethos of the 1954 original. So I'm really hoping they get back to that, only because Ano like really nailed it with Shin Godzilla, and I just want like another one like that. But I still think they're doing amazing. It's just like, if you're not as familiar with the shows that those other two Shin movies are based on, they're going to be like, wait, this is so different from Godzilla. And it's like, yes, that's on purpose. Like, I promise you. But I had a lot of fun, and seeing it in a theater
I
was
always
cool.
forget. Yeah, I bet. I always forget that the guy that did Shin Godzilla is the guy that did Evangelion. I always forget that until you bring it up again. I'm just like, what?
Well, it's like
I
all he
always
worked on
forget that.
forever. Like he was like doing
I know.
Evangelion, and then he was doing the movies and all this shit, and then he finally did like Shin Godzilla, and like could work on like something else. And so it's cool that he's working on these other projects, and I'm really excited to see what they've been Ultraman and Kamen Rider pretty like back to back. So I'm hoping the new one, if they do another one, fingers crossed. But yeah, it was really fun. There was a lot of nerds in that movie theater. People take this shit very seriously. Good lord.
I need to watch Shin Godzilla.
You still haven't seen it?
Mm,
Get on it. It's so good.
I
Oh, it's
know.
so good.
It looks right up my alley.
Oh, it's the best Godzilla movie besides the 1954 version by a country mile. It's wild how good it is and how well Ono understood like the source material. And I think that's why I like these movies so much, is because like they really respect the source material and understand what made it so terrifying. So yeah. Yeah. That's Shin Kamen Rider. It's a good time. Nerds abound.
Sweet.
Yeah. Well, so that about does it for this week's Little Cuts. But before we wrap up, Terry, who are we talking to on Monday?
Oh boy, we just finished recording with them, but we are chatting with the influencer movie director and co-writer Curtis David Harder and the film star Cassandra No, and we influencer is really good. If you, we talked about it last week on Little Cuts. If you haven't watched it, it's out on Shudder. I highly recommend watching it and not reading anything about it because it is a very
Yes,
twisty movie.
very
And
that.
we don't talk spoilers too much, but there is one little thing that we do talk about, and I honestly think this is a movie that's best to go in without knowing anything.
Yes, I very much
So,
agree with that.
homework this weekend, if you want to, is to watch Influencer on Shudder because it's really, really good. But yeah, so we talk about that, and then they also brought with them. So Curtis brought Signs, which we'd already covered, so we just kind of briefly go over his story, and then Cassandra brought the Goosebumps episode. It came from beneath the sink, so we talk about that as well.
Hell yeah. And we are still kind of just chugging along, playing catch up with everything else that we have to watch for festivals. So we're not starting another series yet,
Hmm.
but we will soon. We're just busy and
Yep.
have a lot of movies to watch. So
And I
yeah,
got Diablo 4
yes, that's very true.
started.
Diablo 4, respect.
uh,
Listeners, you've heard from us. We want to hear from you. Did you watch, play, or read anything that we talked about this week and have thoughts? Do you have
we covered a lot of
suggestions?
bases.
I know, seriously. Do you have any suggestions for things we should be talking about? Send us an email at scarredforlifepodcast@gmail.com or reach out to us directly on Twitter. I am at MB McAndrews.
And I'm McGeely Dreadful.
And of course, don't forget to follow the podcast on Twitter at Scarred Podcast.
And please don't forget to review, rate, and subscribe. We had a couple additions to Patreon for our blah blah blah. We had a few new patrons sign up for us for Fresh Wounds, and we're really excited. Thank you for signing up for us, and we hope you enjoy June's offering of Inside.
Thank you to Eric Power for artwork. Thank you to Sean Keller for our music. Thank you everyone for listening. Please stay safe out there, but most importantly, stay creepy.
And until next time.